Julian de Morley would have called himself a Christian soul. But deep within him were the beliefs of his pagan ancestors, not so many years before. Particularly the thought that if someone was built into the walls of his castle, it would stand the stronger. And so it was that he decided that a young girl, a young maiden of that place would be built into the walls of his castle. And everyone said it was wrong, and the priest said it was wrong. But he was a lord of the manor, and in those days his word was law. And as was also the custom in those days, it was the men of that village who had to build the castle, and had to build within it a little room in which the girl could be put. And the day came, that dreadful day, when in solemn procession, with much crying and weeping and prayers, the girl was brought forth, and she was given a spindle, a drop spindle, and wool that she could spin to while away the remainder of her life in this earth. And she was put into that little room, and the stones were put in place, and she was left. For one day they heard her crying. For 2 days they heard her crying. And on the 3rd day they heard her no more. And all was quiet until the anniversary of that dreadful day. When Julian de Morley lay abed, he heard the sound of crying. And there, standing at the foot of his bed, was the form of that young girl. In one hand her spindle, and in the other the wool she was spinning. And she came right to the foot of his bed, and started passing the spindle from hand to hand to hand, as though she was winding thread about his feet. And then she was gone. And when Julian de Morley woke upon the following day, he had not the use of his feet. And all was quiet until another year had passed, when again the sound of crying was heard, and there was a form of that girl passing her spindle from hand to hand to hand, further up his legs. And when he woke on the following day, he had not the use of his legs and must walk with a stick. And so it went on from year to year, until the day came when they found him dead in his bed, as though threads had been wound about his heart. And that's when the Gytrash appeared. A ghostly form. The body was the figure of Julian, but its head was the head of a goat. And as you walked along the road, it followed you, and as you ran, it ran, for if it got in front of you, then you were dead. And don't think they'd seen the last of that girl. No. On each anniversary, there she was again, her victims now the girls of that neighbourhood who were alive as she was dead. The people were in despair. What were they to do? Oh, the priests prayed, to no avail. All the wise women, with all their knowledge and all their herbs, tried what they could, but nothing could stop those true spirits. And then they went to the spaewife, the wise woman of Farthingales nearby, and she said, "Ta'en to t'other." And they couldn't think at first what she meant. And then the elders of the village talked amongst themselves, and they thought, she means to set one spirit against the other. But how are they to do that? Again they went back to Farthingales, to the wise woman, the spaewife, and said, what are we to do if we are to set one against the other? "Ah," she said, "the Gytrash, it is seen most often when there is a burial, is it not?" And they agreed it was so. When someone was laid to rest after their death, why then, yes, they saw the Gytrash. "Right," she said, "you must make a form like the form of a Christian child, and give it burial, as though it were so, in the killing pits outside the village. And you must lay a trail of honey from the castle down to the killing pits, and the maiden, that girl, will follow the trail of honey." And so, with the last sheaf of the harvest, they made a form like a baby. And as though it was a dead baby, they took it to a grave they had dug in the killing pits, and hid themselves nearby. And then there was the Gytrash above the ground, and below the ground. And then, coming down the trail they'd laid with honey, down to that grave came the spinning girl, and she stood by the grave, passing her spindle from hand to hand to hand, and she walked the length of that grave. And then she looked to where they were hiding, as though she knew they were there, and vanished. And they say that the good folk of Gothland, in the county of Yorkshire, have not seen either the spinning girl or the Gytrash from that day until this. And that's where I used to end my story. But last year I met a man who spent his childhood in the farm where the spaewife of Farthingales had lived.